We got 6 sleep tips for athlete recovery, and we are starting right now. What is going on? My name is David Barr. If you're looking to get bigger, faster, stronger, get leaner, go longer, hit that subscribe and then the little bell so you don't miss the latest tips and tricks. And we all need sleep, but this one is especially important because we're all sleep deprived. We know it, everyone is. But this one actually kicked off when I was working with a client. It was actually pro bono, and I was working with this poor guy. He was late 20s, early 30s, and sleep deprivation was destroying his life. There was no need for this, so I tried to fix it. But what turned out was he had actually had a sleep study done because his sleep was so bad. It was impacting him so profoundly. And it turned out that what happened was he was not only having a delayed REM cycle, which is a stage of sleep. It's not the only stage in which we dream, but it's one of the main stages in which we dream, and we help consolidate the memories and skills that we've learned the day before. So he was not only having a delayed REM onset, but after a couple REM cycles, he would actually get kicked out and he would wake up. So you can imagine if your ability to not only just function during the day, but your ability to pick up new skills, acquire new skills, if that's disrupted, you're kind of screwed. So that was the first clue that, hey, most of the stuff I focused on was going to be sleep acquisition, getting sleep, falling asleep. Well, there's also a pretty important component, which is staying asleep. And there's also the more common, most common, which is dealing with sleep inadequacy or insufficient sleep, sleep deprivation. So for those reasons, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change a single video into 3 different videos. And so we'll do this in 3 parts. This one will talk about sleep acquisition, something we all need. But in the other parts, I'll deal with staying asleep, maintaining sleep. And in the third part, talk about dealing with sleep inadequacy or sleep deprivation. Okay, so we are getting started right now on this. Now, this is where I get a little cynical because, yeah, cool, I'm a science guy, but most of the information out there is really heavily science-based, meaning academic, not something we can typically apply. So if you want to share an adult beverage, have a couple of adult beverages at a conference, we could totally geek out over sleep science. But right now, the focus for this video is going to be about helping you fall asleep, helping you acquire sleep, okay? Now, this can be considered to be part of the whole athlete recovery series. I'll link to that in the card in the top right as well as in the description. Be sure to check that out because we need to overhaul the way we look at recovery and our adaptation and ultimately optimize that for ourselves, our athletes, our clients, whatever it may be. So for this one, we're talking application, and there's another key to this. Everybody talks about CNS. What does that mean? Well, typically how you spell CNS is SEX, right? Because it's really, really sexy. Everyone likes to talk about it. We don't really know what it is. Sure, we could say central nervous system. Well, what the hell does that mean, right? So what I'll do is I cover this in another video, pretty quick video for sleep and athletes. I'll link to that in the top right again and in the description. Be sure to check that out. Give you a quick overview of what sleep is, what it does for us. There's some new info in there I think you'll like. So for this one, what we're going to do, tip number 1, overhauling the way we look at sleep. We are looking at facilitating sleep rather than forcing sleep. And this is a big one. Because the way we typically do things, especially if we're in the gym, hitting that performance hard, the way to overcome something, the way to make something happen is to push harder. We got to push harder, right? Pain doesn't matter. We're just going to push through it. It's going to incentivize us. All that good stuff, right? Sleep is the opposite. We can't do that, right? So we have to fight our human nature or our athlete nature, if you want to call it. And we have to be more open and think of it more as facilitating sleep. Think of it as flow. Think of it as accepting as opposed to forcing. And I've never seen anyone talk about this before. I think this is especially important for athletes because, again, we're really more focused on really driving through, putting forth more effort. Well, no, you can't put forth effort when it comes to sleep, right? We just need to relax, let it happen. And unfortunately, we often get into these horrible cycles where we don't fall asleep, so then we get worried about it, and then that causes us to stress, which causes us to not sleep, which causes us to worry more, and it's a terrible cycle. We need to make sure that doesn't happen, okay? So the way to do that, the way to help facilitate sleep, and really, really think about that, because it's really a mindset change. So it might be the most important tip, but once we get that down, and it's a process, you're not going to get it right away, but once we get that down, you'll really be able to employ these other tips with great success. So tip number 2 is going to be relaxation. Yes, okay, relaxation. What does that mean? Well, there's 2 components to this. One is about removing those things that are going to inhibit sleep, especially the facilitation of sleep that we're now after, right? So that's going to be things like games, apps that we use on our phones, electronic devices, whatever it may be. I'm not even talking about the light yet. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm just talking about the actual mental stimulation. Shut off your email, shut off your phone, whatever you need to do. Ideally 90 minutes, more realistically about 60 minutes if you can. Shut that stuff down and just focus on the relaxation, whatever it is. Personally, the best way for me to do this is to unwind by watching the most vacuous, inane TV you can imagine. Cartoons would be ideal, but realistically, it's more like housewife series, reality TV, whatever silliness there is. That yes, I'm going to have questions about the craziness, but really it's meant to help you detach, meant to help you relax and not focus on the stresses of the day, whether it's a previous day or the upcoming day. So that is the removal of stresses. Okay, what are we going to add? This is going to be things like relaxation techniques. Huge fan of this. Really happy to say that this has gained, we'll say, more common approval over the years. It's not so much of the woo or the supernatural nonsense that's out there, which we will talk about, by the way. But there's actual physiological evidence that these things could be helpful. So one of my favorites, PMR, progressive muscle relaxation. The idea of contracting muscles and then relaxing them. So you're contracting to get that feeling of the muscle, then you're relaxing it, and now that you have that enhanced feeling of the muscle, you can help facilitate the relaxation. This is just one thing. There's a variety of different ways that you can do this. But just find the one that's best for you. Some people like to meditate. For me, meditation is more of an active, requires more vigilance. So it's not something I can do before sleep, but if you can do it, if it's going to help facilitate that relaxation and ultimately sleep, then cool, that's exactly what you want to do. But look up the different techniques and just find one that works best for you. Okay, for sleep, supplements, drugs, that kind of thing, I will actually do a whole other video on that because we can go into some gory detail on that. It's a pretty robust topic. But for now, there's a couple that I want to focus on. One is an amino acid that we can actually buy, we can consume orally. It is called GABA. It is a neurotransmitter. Now, typically it's pretty hard to orally ingest a neurotransmitter. So there are some data to suggest that this may not be optimal the way that we take it, but I'll just say personal experience, anecdotal experience, for whatever that's worth. It's something that I find helps relax me at the end of the day. I don't care if it's placebo effect. That's why I'm couching this, so you don't think I'm telling you to go do this. I don't have any kind of financial interest. I'm not part of the GABA conglomerate or anything like that. But if you've heard of GABA, there's a good chance that it's through the whole keto, we'll say, information paradigm, for lack of a better term. They like to promote, keto advocates tend to promote GABA as a very healthy neurotransmitter, whatever that means. Now, GABA is also responsible for us, basically it hinders our ability to acquire skills and learning. It hinders memory. In fact, that's how certain sleep aids like Ambien work. They work through our GABA receptors in our brain, our CNS. Ethanol, alcohol, that we'll talk about in another video, that works through GABA as well. So yes, it may help to facilitate sleep, possibly, but it's something you don't want to be taking all the time. And the reason I mentioned the whole keto thing is not only because I help popularize GABA as just an overall good thing. We all want more GABA. I have a big video coming up, going to publish it this week, so I'll link to it in the description and in the card in the top right once that gets published. But I'm covering myths about keto diets and neurotransmitters, brain hacks, that kind of thing. Because right now it's an echo chamber. I think keto diets are potentially awesome. So I'm not anti-keto, I'm not pro-keto, I'm pro-optimization of performance and body comp. But right now the whole keto thing is just out of control. We have to have some level of, some intellectually honest conversations about it. We have to be able to advance the field and be able to speak rationally about it without just dipping into our echo chambers that we all tend to love. So stay tuned for that. Another one real quick. Another one I have videos on is this huge myth, still widely pervasive, that sleep is our most anabolic time. I bought into this for years. Unfortunately, because we're not feeding, we're actually fasted. Sleep is our most catabolic time. So keep in mind that that myth is not just wrong, it is the opposite of what is true. That's important. So to cover this, I talk about casein protein, a slow digesting, absorbing protein that can help not only mitigate that catabolism or that muscle breakdown overnight, but can actually turn it into a slightly more anabolic time for us. So again, I'll link to that video in the top right and in the description. Be sure to check that one out. That is one of the most universal tips that people can apply from this. Okay, quick sidebar. Don't want to jump into this, but if you are into the supernatural, you are definitely on the wrong channel. But for the rest of us, you may find that there is actually this kind of supernatural sleep sound kind of thing going on. It is what it is, but you know, if it helps you, cool. But it is based on the supernatural. It is, we'll say, scientific nonsense. But again, if you like it, if it's something that you do, then I'm not taking that away from you. Just use it. Who cares? It's not harmful. A lot of people say it helps to facilitate learning throughout the night. You know, it's subliminal, so it's great when we sleep. Well, unfortunately, our brain shuts down the learning response when we sleep, right? That's the whole point of sleeping, is to shut down the learning and start to consolidate those memories, skills, that kind of thing. So subliminal is widely shown to not work overnight. Unfortunately, it would be awesome if it did. How cool would that be if we could just learn more overnight? But that's just not the way our brain and our CNS works. So already spent way too much time on that. Use it however you will. Let's move on. So key 3, sex. Okay, there's 3 components to sex here. And this refers to just general sexual activity, nothing specific. It is going to have a huge mental impact on us if we do this before sleep. It is profoundly distracting, we'll say that. So it's going to help take your mind off the stresses during the day. That is just one component of it. The next is going to be physical. Typically, there's some physical activity involved that can help facilitate sleep, help wear us out a little bit, depending on how it's done. But physical is the second component. The third is going to be neural. If we go to completion, we are going to have a neurotransmitter release that's going to increase a somnolent effect, increase somnolence, make us feel sleepy, lethargic, that kind of thing. That is really going to help facilitate sleep. It's something that not too many people talk about for whatever reason, but leave it at that, and we'll just say sexual activity is fantastic for helping to facilitate sleep. Habits and sleep hygiene. Okay, this is probably, I'll go out on a limb here, probably the most important tip. If you're a subscriber, stay tuned because there's a special guest coming up. You don't want to miss that. But for habits and sleep hygiene, the best way to kick off sleep is going to get your body, get your brain in the habit of falling asleep, not just at certain times. Yeah, of course, everybody knows going to bed at the same time is ideal. Not always realistic. But performing the same set of actions, performing that same routine before you go to bed, that is really going to help trigger that sleeping response. It's going to get you into the habit. It's almost going to condition us in a way to wind down our day, fall asleep. And if you're combining that with the other tips, a fantastic set of habits to actually help facilitate sleep. So make sure, brushing your teeth, at the same time, relative to other tasks that you do before you go to bed, flossing, that kind of thing. Don't stay up for an extra half hour after you've brushed your teeth if that's not something you normally do. And by instilling these habits and getting, basically conditioning ourselves, we can do this pretty much anywhere. We can do this on the road. We can do this in times of sleep deprivation or times when we aren't going to get as much sleep. And it's really going to help us fall asleep quicker. So that is the big one, habits and hygiene. Okay, sleep hygiene is the current buzzword for it. Totally cool if you want to use that, but it's really all about habits. Okay, now for this one, I have a special guest. Okay, hope you're ready for this. Hey everybody, it's me, George Clooney. I just stopped by to say hi to my friend David. I'm just kidding. It's still me, David. David Barr. We were just having a conversation. Look. See? It's still me, right? But the reason you were fooled there is because these glasses have a really powerful enhancing effect. So they might help certain people to look like George Clooney, but more importantly for sleep, they're actually great for blocking out blue light. Now you may have heard of this. This differs from the blue shifting that we talked about in previous videos. That refers to the cellular recovery curve. We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the blue light, that shorter wavelength light that can actually destroy our melatonin and disrupt sleep. This light is put out by, our mobile devices, put out by our TV, put out by our computer monitors. Maybe I need to take these off. I'm staring at myself. It's a little too handsome. But for now, what we're after is blocking out that blue light as much as possible. And yes, your mobile devices, your monitors, they're going to have apps or settings that will help reduce the amount of blue light that's put out. But I like to go that extra step and just turn the world orange, essentially. And the reason I do this goes back to sleep hygiene. Once I start to see the world turn orange, usually about 90 minutes, 60 minutes before I'm trying to sleep, that is a powerful signal that, okay, time to unwind, time to start relaxing and getting into that sleep. We'll call it sleep hygiene. So it's a great visual cue for us, as well as blocking out that blue light that could otherwise disrupt our sleep. Now, these things, I mean, this was $8 on Amazon. I saw this on Shark Tank recently, selling for 50, 60 USD. Way too much unless you want to wear these throughout the day. And if you do, totally cool. But you don't need to spend a lot of money. It's just a piece of orange plastic, really. And you can get them for relatively cheaply. Depending on the style, you can actually fit them under your glasses like I did. But strongly recommend this. Again, not just for blocking out that blue light, but for facilitating the sleep habit, your sleep hygiene. Special thanks to Anthony Almada for hooking me up with this idea, sending me the literature on this, the science on this. I've been doing this for probably 3.5 years now. And again, this is something you could take with you on the road. You don't need to limit this to just being at home. You can do this anywhere, and it's really going to help stimulate that process of falling asleep. Now, there is a warning, not a terrible warning, but I once wore these outside. I'm typically very photosensitive, especially when there's a lot of snow around. I get snowblind pretty easily, so I wore these for 4 hours straight in the day. I'd never done this before. I typically only wear them at night because, again, once I see the world turn orange, I'm trying to facilitate sleep. I did this during the day because I needed to drive and I really wanted to cut down on the glare. And it was really weird because it actually seemed to brighten everything up. even though everything was super bright because of the snow. I can't really explain it. You just have to try it. Maybe you have ski goggles that are very similar, but it was a very, very cool effect. Now, I don't recommend doing that too often, especially if you're trying to get your body primed to sleep and get into those that pre-sleep cycle. But it's one of those things, if you do want to try it, you will find that when you take them off during the day, everything takes on kind of a bluish gray tinge. It looks very, very weird, and that's because your body is now getting all that blue light that it hasn't had before, or hasn't had for a couple hours, and it takes on a very, very weird tone. So definitely don't do that before any kind of sporting event, but it's one of those things, if you want to experiment with, totally cool. I would just recommend minimizing the amount of time that you do that for, because you really want to use it for that sleep cycle. So those are 6 sleep tips. I will link to, like I said, the rest of the video series. Once I publish the other parts, you're going to want to check those out. I'll link to those. Be sure to employ these. Don't expect miracles right away. It can take some time to really develop the habits, to really help facilitate your sleep. And remember, it comes with that paradigm shift. It comes with the idea of thinking about facilitating sleep rather than causing sleep. Okay, so that's how we're going to start. Thanks for watching. I'm David Barr, and until next time, raise the bar.